The 6 biggest Commander storylines.
It is caught!
Delivered at 6 o'clock sharp. It's the Pick 6 at 6.
We set out to find a leader, someone who could take this franchise to the next level, and build an elite team that consistently competes for championships.
All right, number 1, competition.
Number 1.
Competition is Dan Quinn's favorite thing in the entire world, and there is going to be competition at multiple positions coming up in training camp. Right now, it's much more of a teaching period, much more of an education period, much more of an install period, much more of a get everybody on the same page period, but the competition is coming, including at kicker.
Well, I think at the top of it, just like at all the spots, John, like the competition part of it to go. And so we'll keep digging in, over the next few days, and certainly as we're preparing into camp, not just there, but all over. And but yeah, we will include Lucas as part of a tryout for the next couple of days as well.
So there is a new kicker that they brought in that they'll be trying out. There will presumably be other kickers that get looks throughout the spring if anybody's let go or comes out of the UFL, or in the fall if anybody's let go for sure. And then they'll get to who they want by the end of training camp, and perhaps it'll be someone who's not with them at all through any of that period, because if someone has a good camp somewhere else and loses a kicking battle, maybe to a veteran or maybe to a younger guy, they might just say, hey, that other team's second best kicker would be the best one for us. And all that competition we did, hey, they were competing too. It just wasn't in our building. That's the nature of things. I think more interesting probably, though, is the secondary, where there is, I would say, like multi-layered competition. Obviously, there's simple stuff like who's the starting outside corners, who's the starting safety, whatever. But because they play so many different sub-packages, and because they have so many roles, and because, as Joe Witt said, they're 17 or 18 starters, you have all kinds of competition for all kinds of snaps on the field. And Dan Quinn also talked about that this morning.
No, absolutely. This is now, and actually through the first 3 or 4 weeks of training camp, there'll still be that to find out the right things, the right patterns. And it won't be just 11. There'll be 15, 16, 17 guys that'll have a role, 3 safeties, 4 big D linemen, 3 backers, 2 backers. So not just at the secondary, but at a number of the spots too that we're still pushing.
I think the thing that I really appreciate about this staff is they want to find out what people do well and build stuff to ensure that those people are on the field in a position to do that stuff. And they also want to find out what guys don't do well, and they would like to avoid those players on the field doing that stuff. And when you have as many options as they have, then you can use this period to find that stuff out and then build something. Obviously, they've built a lot of it already, but test it, keep what sticks, throw out what doesn't, maybe create a new thing if you find something new along the way. And by the time September rolls around, you'll have some good stuff and go deploy it and then see how it does against other people. But they're definitely mixing and matching a lot of different defensive backs, and they're not just mixing and matching them amongst each other. They're mixing and matching them with different people playing alongside them. So, for instance, a bunch of different guys have gotten to play snaps with Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu at the linebacker position. So at that point, you can compare, okay, the communication for Wagner and Louvu we know was good. This breakdown happened in the secondary between these two guys. Maybe we need to mark that down as a data point. That's the kind of stuff that I think is really interesting, is it's not just like, okay, plug and play one thing. And the 2s are always kind of with the 2s and the 3s are with the 3s. It's like, all right, let's take the 3 secondary and the 1 linebackers and the 2 D line and see how they play together. And I think that is really good information gathering to see what guys truly do well and build that Commanders defense like Joe Witt has talked about so often.
Number 2.
Jayden Daniels obviously continues to be the main story, and whether or not he's going to start is going to be the biggest story come August. He was QB1 today, working with the 1-0 line. I'd imagine Mariota gets the bulk of that work tomorrow, which is interesting because it actually hasn't been that big of a talking point. Like, it's not this big, contentious quarterback controversy. It'll be a discussion, but Dan Quinn and company continue to kind of downplay it as much as they can, but they also continue to be asked about it. And today, the version of the question was, what do they need to see to ultimately name Jayden Daniels the starter?
Yeah, and I think what's important for Jayden and some of his teammates, especially the young guys coming in, as the reps are now happening, how are you doing in the execution of those, whether that's playing quarterback or tackle or nickel or safety. And so the expectation is just to see, how familiar he is with the concepts, making sure, all right, this one we want to keep, this one, we don't, in terms of, the things that he has the most comfort with. So I think just really running the system now. Obviously, you see us at the line of scrimmage some, we huddle some, so we put in a big package. Now it's about execution of it.
And there's just a level of control and trust that you have to earn as a quarterback. And I always think that's really interesting because, coaches, especially I feel like offensive coaches, often will go with the guy they trust versus the guy that maybe has the higher upside but a little bit more variability. And that comes down to not necessarily how they play, but the ability to call the play in the huddle, the ability to get guys lined up, to at least give whatever it is that they designed on paper a chance. And I always found that pretty fascinating. And some of that is probably ego-driven, where it's like, if this guy would just execute my scheme. And it's like, nah, this other dude who might not execute it quite as often but has playmaking skills that your favorite guy that you trust and is like your blankie doesn't have, that guy's gonna win more games. That guy's going to give you a better chance to win on a more consistent basis. But I also understand it, that you want to be able to just say, we trust that when the play call goes into your helmet, you're going to try to run it the best you can, and that best is going to involve, at the very least, starting from the right place. And so what are some of the things that Dan Quinn and company need to see from kind of that mastery type of category for Jayden Daniels to earn that trust, as if he isn't already? He definitely is, but what's the next step?
Well, I would say at times getting out of a bad play, here comes a blitz to this side, get to the check, get to something else, knowing where to go with the correct read. And at the end of it, it's just having command, honestly. It's whether it's in the huddle or at the line of scrimmage. And the nice part, what you do see, this is a guy who's had a lot of starts and a lot of experience. That showed up early for when he first started here, and it continues right now. And I think when you guys are watching practice, you'll feel that as well.
It's something that I definitely have felt. That control is, I think, the reason that I came out of the first OTA being like, I think this guy's going to be a starter. I just think he executes the offense better. I think that Mariota's still learning this offense in a lot of ways. And Jayden's, because they're actually coming from the same place and of not knowing, yes, Marcus has tremendous NFL experience compared to Jayden. But in this offense, they're kind of starting pretty equal. And I think the way that Jayden has handled it has been pretty tremendous. And accordingly, he's got the higher upside. He might have the higher current side, if you will. And I think he's going to be the starter in not too long into August, if not certainly by week 1. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And this is our Pick 6 at 6, where we give you the 6 biggest takeaways from the day. Off the 6 best sound bites often is the form. And one thing that John Keim mentioned when he was on the show with us earlier is it's not really about it's not just what you're seeing from Jayden Daniels. It's what you're hearing. And Terry McLaurin was asked about his young quarterback today. This is number 3 here, Anthony. Number 3, please.
Number 3.
Yes, number 3 in our Pick 6 at 6. And here was McLaurin, who had lots of words to describe his young quarterback.
He's very charismatic. I think he's really personal when he walks into the building. He just has a calm demeanor about him. He's very approachable. So guys have no problem whether you're an offensive lineman, receiver, running back, talking to him, communicating what the objective is of this play or what he's seeing or what he's thinking. And he came in really prepared. I feel like when he was getting one's reps or where he's working with the twos, he does a great job of getting the most out of the reps that he needs to accomplish. And I think he's going to be a really good player because of the time and the work that he puts in. I don't think I've had a young quarterback that really has come in and within the first week he's like, hey, can we get this route or let me get this rep after practice? And So it's exciting for me because, that opens the door where because, they got a lot on their plate. But at the same time, when there's that open door of communication and he's not afraid to get that work in before or after practice or talk through things, it makes the growth part a lot quicker. And he's very talented, but he's extremely humble as well. And I'm looking forward to see how he continues to grow. And it's hard to pinpoint. When you're around him more, you can really tell, like, he's humble, but he's confident in his ability. Like, he's played at the highest level. He's played against really great competition, and he knows that he can make all the throws. So he's not putting the cart before the horse. He's literally taking this thing day by day, and he's doing a really good job right now.
There's a phrase that I love from my guy, Vinny Scolo. Vinny is a trainer up in Central New York who's worked with a bunch of NFL guys over the years. And Vinny is the first guy I heard use the phrase, a white belt mentality. And if you're familiar with martial arts at all, the white belt in a lot of them is the belt they give you when you walk in the door. You got to tie your uniform with something. They got to give you some belt. The black belt's the one you earn later on in the journey. If you know the martial arts as well, the black belt's not the end of the journey. It's the beginning. But anyway, enough martial arts talk. But using the analogy here, like, you walk in, it's your first day, and you just want to learn. Like, that's why you're there. That's why you're showed up. And Vinny often tells his athletes, I want you to show up every single day. And he himself would be like, I show up every single day. Even though I'm training NFL guys, I have a white belt mentality. I'm here to learn. And it feels like that's how Jayden Daniels is. Jayden Daniels very much seems to have a white belt mentality, that no matter where he goes in his career, he's always going to be like, what can I learn? I'm going to approach this as if I know nothing, as if I'm a beginner. Now, there's probably a little bit more of a nuanced conversation about how you actually go about that, where at some point you know enough that you don't necessarily just want to take in all the information. You want to challenge it based off of the things that you've learned previously, et cetera, et cetera. But the mentality of being open-minded, right? It doesn't mean that you actually implement every new thing you learn because you don't know anything. But the mentality of being that open-minded, which is why I love the phrase, I think is something that Jayden Daniels has in spades, and is something that is rubbed off and been apparent to his teammates like Terry McLaurin, as Terry so eloquently described there.
Number 4.
Dan Quinn, of course, back second stint as a head coach. D.C. in Dallas, head coach in Atlanta, D.C. in Seattle. You know how this his resume goes at this point. So, hey Dan, how's it going being a head coach again?
Yeah, boy, what a great question. I would say the first thing that I probably noticed is really the work of the players. I thought they've thrown a hell of an off season. We asked them a lot early on, create some standards together, and I've really been impressed by the work and the skill work that they've put in. From a coaching staff-wise, it was a great thing to hear. One of the Bill Walsh fellows that had been in here for the few days, he said, you would have never known that you just came together just a few months ago as a staff. Being around everybody, it felt like they'd been around each other for years. So that made me feel good knowing that these guys are connected on the field and off, because the players see that as well. To see a coaching staff that's connected, they'll feel that same example that applies to the locker room.
I really actually love that point, and it's something that I hadn't really thought about until I heard Dan say that, and it's 100% true. There's been a couple times where the thoughts crossed my mind. I was like, oh, those guys haven't worked together before, but you just kind of almost take for granted the fact that, you know, the communication between the coaches and not just like Cliff and his quarterbacks coaches, or working with Tavita and working with David Blau and, Bobby Ingram is a wide receivers coach. These guys have never worked together before, but even across the ball, you've seen some times where there's really good communication. Cliff and Joey Jr. and everybody's able to get what they need done. Not two sides of the ball yelling at each other all the time. Like, it is a very cohesive staff, and that absolutely cleans up the communication to the players. And it's something that, in talking to Logan and other guys that have played, like, there's times where you're in a meeting and it's pretty clear that the staff is not on the same page, because the OC does things one way and then the tight ends coach is telling you something else, and you get on the field and the quarterback's coach is running the drill and he says it another way, and you're like, do you guys, like, what do you do in your meetings without us? And that kind of thing is just not happening at this stage. It's early, and there hasn't been a lot of room for conflict because this is the happiest time of year in the NFL. But it is something that I definitely appreciate and you almost can take for granted because that's how it should be, but it often isn't. And the cohesiveness of everything has been it's been apparent, and it's great. And it's clearly something that Dan values. And there's a quote that came out of a behind the scenes, I think it was Commander's Log video that the team put out from one of Dan's first staff meetings. And it is, you can only coach someone to the depth of your relationship with them. And that just resonated with me on like a spiritual level. And the building of the relationships between the coaches so they can work with each other, and then the coaches and the players, and then the players and the players, right? Because that is true if like Bobby Wagner's trying to coach up Jamin Davis. He can only do that to the depth of the relationship that they have. And it seems like that level of effort to get to know each other, to work together, to build professional relationships is paying off on the field, and you got guys making plays and celebrating each other and acting like a team. And that hasn't always been the case around these parts as we're live here in Ashburn after day one of mandatory minicamp for the Commanders. Wrapping up our pick six. We got a fun one to finish, but first one more serious, if you will, football situation.
Number 5.
This is not a time of year where they're doing a lot of evaluation. This is a lot of teaching. But as they put together the roster and start to do the evaluation, I think it's worth asking what value does like last year's tape, whether it's here or somewhere else, play in evaluating a player? And it seems like to get here, obviously your tape last year mattered and who you are as a player mattered. But moving forward, Dan Quinn says not so much.
You know what? I didn't really discuss much from the past, and I wasn't here, so I don't have a way to compare into that. And so every year is different. So what I can say is this is what I've seen from this part moving forward and finding all the unique stuff that it does have. So all I was looking for to say, I've got fresh eyes, no bias on what happened or what could happen. I just want to see what your best looks like. And that's what now and into training camp is for. So that's why this is such an important camp for us. This is our last time together before we go to training camp. And I really want to see a lot of the learning, the technique, the communication, the speed. And then when we get to training camp, we'll add the physicality part to that.
One great trait of a coach, Will Dawkins said this about Brian Keefe on the Wizards side of this, and we'll obviously see if it's ultimately true and how good Keefe can be with this. But one great characteristic is, do you see what someone can be? Not what they are, what they can be. And I think that is essentially what Quinn is saying here is like, yeah, okay, we've seen what you have been so far, but if you had bad coaching or you were asked to do something you weren't supposed to, it's not a reflection of what you could be. Now, in this system, we're seeing what you can be. And so we're going to evaluate that, and I think that's the right way to put together a 53. From the football field to the baseball field to wrap up, yeah, we got to talk about it. The final number here in our pick six.
Number 6.
Dan Quinn was asked last week about Jayden Daniels' first pitch that he was going to throw for the Nationals, and was like, yeah, no, we talked about it. We gotta do a good job. It didn't go great for Jayden Daniels, so what did Dan Quinn have to say about it today?
Oh, the first pitch, lots to discuss there. We had a lot of fun and a lot of practice. It was actually my first time at a Nationals game, so it was a really cool venue to be a part of. So it's a good thing he's throwing here and not down at the ballpark.
Well said, Dan. Well said. Well said. Very, very different jobs. Baseball pitcher, throwing a baseball, very different than throwing a football, and that is they're paying Jayden Daniels to throw a football. So he did a good job of that today, and he continues to do a good job of that, which is good because that's the one he's paid to do. All right, that is our pick 6 at 6. The 6 biggest Commander storylines at 6 o'clock. We do it when they practice for the off season, and we'll do it every single day of training camp as well. When we get back here on the Hoffman Show, we didn't get a chance yesterday to talk about the big NBA news, non-finals adjacent. Dan Hurley turned down the Lakers. What's next for the Lakers? And are we just at a point where the Lakers aren't one of the premier franchises in the NBA anymore? Am I jumping the gun there? We'll talk about it next on the Team 980.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.